with FDR would prove to be a sticking point in their relationship throughout the rest of the war years. The Prime Minister explained his fears that under the Charter, the Arabs of Palestine might claim the right to expel the Jews or to forbid future Jewish immigration there. I am strongly wedded to the Zionist policy, Churchill told the President. Meeting later with his war cabinet, the Prime Minister declared that if Britain and the US emerge from the war victorious, the creation of a great Jewish state in Palestine would be one of the matters discussed at the peace conference. Returning to London on August 24th, the Prime Minister discussed his meetings with the President in a BBC broadcast. He also raised the issue of German atrocities in the Soviet Union.
There has never been methodical, merciless butchery on such a scale, or approaching such a scale. And this is but the beginning. We are in the presence of a crime without a name.
On the evening of December 7th, 1941, Winston Churchill was at Chequers, the official country estate of the British Prime Minister, dining with the newly appointed US Ambassador Gilbert Wynand and FDR Special Envoy Averell Harriman. Churchill turned on the radio so the group would listen to the 9 p.m. BBC News.
Here is the news. Japan's long-threatened aggression in the Far East began tonight with air attacks on United States naval bases in the Pacific.
As Churchill switched on the radio, there was a bulletin about the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor, which had just occurred. The Prime Minister jumped to his feet and said, "Great Britain shall declare war on Japan." A moment later, Ambassador Wynand got President Roosevelt on the telephone and confirmed the attack. He then put the Prime Minister on the phone. Roosevelt's first words were, "We are all in the same boat now." It was something that Churchill had been waiting to hear since May of 1940. That night, Churchill would later report he slept the sleep of the saved and thankful. 2 weeks later, Prime Minister Churchill arrived in Washington, D.C. to meet with President Roosevelt and strategize the now joint war effort between Great Britain and the U.S. Churchill stayed on as FDR's guest in the White House.
Churchill arrives and they put him up in the room, which is now known, of course, as the Churchill Room. And he said, "Now I have a few rules. There's not to be any talking in the hallways around it. I don't like to hear that. I hate to hear whistling. And I need to have a bottle of sherry every morning before breakfast. I need to have scotch and soda before lunch. And I need to have wine and liquor and brandy after dinner." He would then stay up with Roosevelt until 2 a.m. The two of them would smoke and drink until finally Eleanor would come in and say, "Isn't it time for you two little boys to go to bed?"
One morning, during Churchill's visit, FDR had an idea and asked his aide to wheel him into the Prime Minister's room immediately.
It so happened Churchill was just coming out of the bathtub and had absolutely nothing on. So Roosevelt said, "I'm so sorry, I'll come back in a few moments," but Churchill, ever able to speak spontaneously in a very formal voice, said, "Oh no, please stay. The Prime Minister of Great Britain has nothing to hide from the President of the United States."
The day after,
Russia on my own. Here we are, together, facing a group of mighty foes who seek our ruin. Here we are, together, defending all that to free men is dear. Twice in a single generation, the catastrophe of World War has fallen upon us. Twice in our lifetime has the long arm of fate reached out across the ocean to bring the United States into the forefront of the battle. Will I avow my hope and faith, sure and inviolate, that in the days to come, the British and American people will, for their own safety and for the good of all, walk together in majesty, in justice, and in peace.
US Congress, which a year earlier balked at helping Great Britain, was now giving its Prime Minister a standing ovation. Around the United States, there was no more popular debate. The strain of the last few weeks and months, as well as the 10-day journey from England to the US, had taken its toll on Churchill. The morning after his triumphant speech, as he was opening the window to his room at the White House, he felt a sharp pain in his chest. His personal physician, Lord Murren, was immediately summoned, and after examining the Prime Minister, he found that Churchill had suffered a mild heart attack. Rather than alarming Churchill or his American hosts, the doctor kept the news to himself, telling his patient that he had strained a muscle and needed some rest. He insisted that Churchill relax for a few days in Florida before his upcoming trip to Canada, where he was scheduled to speak to the Canadian Parliament. Lord Murren's secret would be kept for almost a quarter of a century. There was little evidence of the heart attack as Churchill resumed a full schedule of meetings in the US after his trip to Canada. At the end of January, it was time for him to return to Great Britain. President Roosevelt saw him off at the airfield. When Churchill and FDR at last said goodbye during their Atlantic Charter Conference, the president had taken his bodyguard, Inspector Thompson, aside and said to him, "Take care of him. He is about the greatest man in the world. In fact, he may very likely be the greatest." Now, Roosevelt's final words to Churchill as he boarded his plane were, "Trust me to the bitter end." At the start of his journey across the Atlantic, the plane's captain invited the Prime Minister to the control deck. Churchill then asked if he could pilot the plane. The Prime Minister's questions about the plane's operations assured the captain that he could handle it himself. The captain turned off the automatic pilot and turned over the control of the plane to Churchill. The Prime Minister then asked if he could make a couple of banked turns, which he did, with considerable success. The captain then asked the Prime Minister when he'd last piloted a plane. Churchill replied, 1913. The captain then asked the Prime Minister when he'd last piloted a plane. Churchill replied, 1913. As the Prime Minister's plane crossed the Atlantic, a navigational error sent it within 5 to 6 minutes of Nazi-occupied France. When the mistake was discovered, the captain turned north at once. Now entering British airspace from the direction of France, it was detected by British radar as a hostile bomber. 6 Hurricane fighters were dispatched to shoot it down before the captain was able to identify who they were. Fortunately, Churchill would later comment, they failed in their mission. Winston Churchill, who'd been in the political wilderness just a few years before, who some had believed would never last as Prime Minister, now returned to England in triumph. He had forged an alliance with the United States, one that few would have predicted when he became Prime Minister in 1940. But it was a go, he insisted, was a